Hello everyone, and welcome back to the Winning Agenda's Hero Spotlight series. My name's Jesse Muleman Marshall, and I'm really happy to be here with a new hero in Dynasty, Arakni Huntsman. It's the first new classic constructed hero that we've had, obviously since Uprising, since the previous set, but it's also the classic constructed hero from Dynasty. So it's pretty exciting to be diving into this hero spotlight today. And not only is it a new hero, but it's an entirely new class for Flesh and Blood, which is very exciting. You know, last time in Everfest, we got a Guardian hero again, so not a new class. And in Uprising, we had 3 heroes for existing classes. So it's been quite a while since we've had a hero for a brand new class in Flesh and Blood. So the first thing, as always in our hero spotlights, is to take a look at the hero card. So Arakni Huntsman is a 4 intellect, 40 HP hero. It says, whenever you play a card with contract, new keyword, you may look at the top card of target opponent's deck. You may put it on the bottom of that deck. So this ability, which we'll see in a moment, synergizes really, really well with Arakni's core keyword, contract, which allows Arakni to amass silver and possibly in the future other currency to trade in for future advantage. Before we go any further as well, I should say that this video is part of our Hero Spotlight series, which you can find in the back catalogue on YouTube. We've got a special playlist just for the Hero Spotlight videos. So if you enjoy this video, I encourage you to check out the other Hero Spotlights. Obviously, some of them were created a little while ago and card pools do chop and change, but a lot of the core hero cards and the core mechanics obviously remain relevant over time. So check those out. And if you're returning here because you enjoy the rest of the Hero Spotlight series, thank you for being here. And special thanks as well, I should say, to our YouTube members who support the channel, particularly Bernhard, who was our member giveaway winner this month, who prompted me to make this video because he reminded me that he particularly enjoys the Hero Spotlight series. So thanks, Bernhard, for that. So we'll move on with the core mechanic here, and one of the core mechanics that Arakni has, and that is the ability to rebuy their equipment. So we'll come to contract in a minute and exactly what those cards are. But before we do, I kind of want to take a step forward, if you like, and talk about one of the great new uses that an Arakni can make of those silvers that they generate from fulfilling their contracts. So there are 2 equipment for Arakni, and these are the only 2 assassin equipment as of the date of this video. The first one is Black Tech Whisperers. It's a 1 defense battle-worn legendary leg piece. And the other is Mask of Perdition. It's also a 1 defense battle-worn Majestic headpiece. So both of them have this ability. If they're in your graveyard at the start of your turn, you can destroy 2 silvers you control. If you do, you get to re-equip them. They also both have an attack reaction to destroy them. Black Tech Whisperers says target attack action card gains, when this hits a hero, it gains go again. So it gives an on-hit go again to one of your attacks as an attack reaction. And Mask of Perdition says destroy Mask of Perdition, target assassin attack action gains, when this hits a hero, banish the top card of your deck. So they both only work with assassin attack reactions, attack action cards. And they both give an additional on-hit. Black Tech Whisperers gives you go again. Mask of Perdition gives you an additional banish, which helps you to fulfill your contract additional times and build up additional silver. So they both synergize really well with Arakni's core mechanics. Black Tech Whisperers being a core way on the board to give your stuff go again on hit as an attack reaction, and Mask of Perdition to help you refill your silver. One of the things that's really important with these, though, is that they are both 1 block battle worn that you can rebuy over the game. So this basically means that Arakni has 2 pieces on the board that you can block with on the first turn or the first couple of turns, use their ability, then rebuy them and use the battle worn again because they come back fresh and ready to block. So that's pretty cool. You get to maybe get 2, 3, 4 block out of these over the game, which makes them, I think, extremely, extremely powerful. So we'll move on to have a look at, and of course, silver tokens. For those of you who aren't aware exactly what it does, you can pay 3 resources, destroy it, draw a card, go again. So you cycle a blue and get a fresh card, basically. But more importantly, you can obviously use them to rebuy these. Arakni's weapons are both once per turn, pay 2 resources, attack, go again. They only attack for 1, so it's a terrible rate on Arakni's weapons. But they have this ability piercing 1, so if it's defended by an equipment, it has +1. So you're kind of cheekily saying to your opponent, I want a card from you, right? Like you can't just put your 1-block equipment in front of this. And you can't get those value blocks, particularly off, for example, a battle worn equipment that's already blocked something else for its 2-block, and then they try and use their second block with it to block out a spider's bite. They can't do that because it gets +1 if it's defended by an equipment. So they have to commit a 2-block equipment to be able to stop it. And it's got this pretty powerful on hit, which says when it hits a hero, the next time they defend with 1 or more attack action cards this turn, those cards have -1 defense while defending. So spider's bites are not so much about dealing heaps of damage themselves. They're obviously very inefficient from a damage perspective, but what they will do is if they hit, give your contract cards a greater chance of hitting by making your opponent's defending cards weaker, and basically tipping the scales in favor of you being able to fulfill your contracts. So what exactly are these contracts that I've mentioned a few times? They are attack action cards that have this keyword contract that basically says you are contracted to do X. Whenever you complete this contract, all the ones in this set say create a silver token. So they let you generate silver to rebuy your equipments, and they are made more likely to hit if you hit with your spider's bites, therefore making your opponent's blocks more inefficient. So as I said, they all have a different condition in terms of you are contracted to do X. Eradicate, for example, says you're contracted to banish opponent's yellow cards. And as we'll see, there's a Majestic for each of the colors, and they each contract you to banish your opponent's cards of the same color pitch. So the red, Leave No Witnesses, contracts you to banish your opponent's red cards, and Surgical Extraction contracts you to banish your opponent's blue cards. Now, some may say that I'm more attracted to this sort of hero because I'm a lawyer and contracts are sort of my business. Maybe that's right. But I love this mechanic. I think it's really, really cool. It's very creative. It's a way to basically give you a powerful on-hit ability for every single one of your attacks that have this keyword. And as we'll see in a moment, all of the assassin attacks in this set, other than one, Majestic, have contract on them. So you're already coming into this with a hero that has a plethora of on-hits, which are a little bit different to the way on-hits are distributed for the other heroes. So the other classes that have plentiful on-hits are Guardian and Ranger are 2 good examples. They both have different on-hit abilities for all their different attacks. Guardian with the crush and some with just general on-hits, and Rangers with basically on-hits for most. Some of them fuse in Lexi's case, and some of them with aim counters on the more recent cards in this set. But they are classes where you get this toolbox of different on-hits that you can use to attack different heroes' game plans or attack more effectively at different points in the game. Whereas Assassin has these on-hits that are all the same. So they're all generating you silver tokens, which brings limitations in terms of they're not disrupting your opponent as such. But what they do is give you a consistency of game plan that you can plan towards a particular outcome over the course of the game with your deck design. And it also, you can plan towards a particular outcome in terms of how you play out the game and what your game plan is and what you're building towards. So positives and negatives, swings and roundabouts. You don't get the disruption that Rangers and Guardians get, but you do get a consistency of on-hit triggers that threaten to give you a benefit and an advantage that builds and builds over the course of the game, letting you, for instance, rebuy equipment that you can then block with again and then use to give something else go again. So in terms of the actual other effects, they all have a different effect, or they don't all. Some of them have a different effect in terms of when they hit. So Eradicate, for example, lets you banish the top X cards rather than just the top card, which makes it more likely that you're going to be able to fulfill the contract. That being said, Eradicate's contract is a little harder to fulfill because it's yellow cards, which for most heroes, excluding light heroes, of course, are going to be a lower density in the opponent's deck. And as we go through all the different contract cards, you'll see that you can sort of evaluate their power level, not only on their base stats, but also on the likelihood that you'll be able to fulfill the contract. So the density in your opponent's deck of whatever the contract is that you're trying to hit, as well as the additional on-hits that you might get. So Leave No Witnesses has a different additional on-hit. It says, when this hits a hero, banish the top card of their deck, which is the sort of standard on-hit for these assassin attacks, and up to 1 card in their arsenal. So this is really powerful. Like, this is a 0 for 4, which is your kind of base rate for an attack. It doesn't have go again or conditional go again, but it does have a built-in on-hit, which you get on hit, banish the top card of their deck, and if it's a red card, you get a silver token. Like, that's the baseline. But then also, if they have an arsenal, you get to banish their arsenal, maybe get another silver token, and get a pseudo CNC effect. So Leave No Witnesses, super powerful. Even if it was just the arsenal, even if you didn't get the card off the top of the deck, that would be really amazing. But the fact that you get that one card off the top, regardless of whether they have an arsenal or not, so you've always got a shot at fulfilling the contract off the top. But then if they have an arsenal, you get to take that away, so it's card advantage, and maybe get another silver token without using your Mask of Perdition, without putting anything else into this, is really, really strong. So Leave No Witnesses is one that you're going to dread seeing on the other side of the table, that's for sure, particularly if you're an aggro deck and you don't want to have to block it out. Or if you're any deck and you've already been hit by a Spider's Bite or two, and your attack action cards are reduced in power when they're blocking this turn. So Surgical Extraction is a 2-cost attack, and obviously this is the blue, so it's going to be have the weakest stats, but interestingly, it also has the most powerful, arguably, on-hit effect. So it says, when this hits a hero, banish the top card of their deck. So you get that baseline, I banish one card from the deck, I always have a chance to fulfill this contract by hitting a blue card off the top, and you get to look at their hand and banish a card from hand. So it's very similar to Leave No Witnesses, but instead of going for the arsenal, you just go straight for the hand. Obviously, your opponent can play around this by blocking out with their entire hand and keeping their arsenal. So in those situations, you'd rather have the Leave No Witnesses than the Surgical Extraction. And there's an argument that Surgical Extraction is more vulnerable to that kind of play because your opponent generally can't block with their arsenal unless it's a defense reaction. So if they have anything other than a defense reaction in arsenal, unless they play an Art of War, they can't block with it, which means they have to block out the Leave No Witnesses. Whereas with Surgical Extraction, they can conceivably have blocked other things earlier in the turn, use their last couple of cards to block the Surgical Extraction, and then still, or their last card, or perhaps block out other things earlier in the turn. And then your Surgical Extraction, if they've got no cards in hand, is not threatening as much. So swings and roundabouts, but I think in general, if your opponent's blocking out with their whole hand against you as an assassin and you're getting to then very likely keep a full hand the following turn, you're probably pretty happy with that, as most mid-range or aggressive heroes are in Fab. So yeah, Surgical Extraction, Leave No Witnesses, very, very strong. Obviously, Surgical Extraction, the one downside about it that I would mention as well is that as something that's contracting you to hit blue cards, it's more likely to be, it's at its strongest against Guardians and other decks that play lots of blue cards, but they're also the decks that are going to be A, most willing to block out with their whole hand, and B, most able to block things out if they want to and need to, in terms of by playing defense reactions to stop your attack reactions and things like that. So Surgical Extraction, it's going to be interesting to see how powerful it turns out to be. I think Leave No Witnesses will be an all-star. Surgical Extraction, though, even if it's not quite as good on balance as Leave No Witnesses, it is a blue, so that's fine. The non-Majestic contract cards are also really, really interesting. So what I'm going to go through with these ones is those that I think are particularly strong and you're likely to play, 3, 6, 9 copies in most Assassin decks. Those that are a little more situational, so you might play 3 and then have 3 more in your sideboard, and then those that are pretty much exclusively sideboard or against most of the field, you're not going to be sure whether you're going to hit the contract. So I should say all of these are either at red, 0 for 4s or 1 for 5s. So the base stats we don't really need to go through. We'll just note whether they're 0 for 4 or 1 for 5 and block 3. But it's the condition that we're going to really be focusing on in this section. So Slay the Scholars is one of those that I think you will include 3, 6, 9 copies more often than not. It's a 0 for 4 at red. It says you are contracted to banish opponents' non-attack action cards. Of course, a lot of decks play non-attack action cards and play a lot of them. Whenever you complete this contract, create a silver token. When this hits a hero, banish the top card of their deck. So we'll see that all of the on-hits in this section, all the commons and rares that have on-hits, just banish the top card of the deck, and if you fulfill the contract, you get the silver token. So Slay the Scholars, non-attack actions, pretty easy to hit, and generally a pretty high density in, Wizard, Runeblade, and some other decks as well. Sack the Shifty, you're contracted to banish opponent's cards with base go again. This is one that any other aggro deck is going to have a lot of base go again. And of course, this includes non-attack and attack action cards with base go again. So any Runeblade is going to be filled with these, any Runeblade deck. Any Ninja deck is going to be filled with these. Any Illusionist deck is also going to have a lot of cards with base go again. But there will be, of course, some heroes like Guardians that may not have a lot of base go again cards. So in a Guardian heavy meta, Sack the Shifty might be more in the middle category if you play 3. But if you're heading into a pretty aggro heavy meta, there will be a lot of cards that have go again. And I should say even a deck like Icelander still does have a fair amount of cards that have go again. You know, you've still got things like Channel Lake Frigid and things like Amulet of Ice and so on and so forth, which do have go again. So then we've got Annihilate the Armed, which is the complementary one to Slay the Scholars. This cares about attack action cards. It's a 1 for 5 this time. And again, the standard clause, when it hits, you banish 1 card. And if it fulfills your contract, then you get a silver token. And it's worth mentioning that with all of these, the power of Mask of Perdition, you start to see it come through, that you can choose, obviously the Majestics have more powerful on hits, but you can make any of these slightly more powerful and more likely to hit 2 silvers or fulfill their requirement twice by trashing your Mask of Perdition, which then, if you do create 2 silvers, lets you rebuy it or your boots. So yeah, it synergizes very well, and because you get to choose when you use it, you can try and get the maximum value out of it at the time in the game when it's useful for you. So Plunder the Poor is in this middle category of cards that I think you will probably play 3 main deck, but you might have a couple more in your sideboard to bring in against the decks that have higher density of cards that fulfill this requirement. So this is opponent's cards with cost 1 or less. Admittedly, most decks will have a higher density of cards that cost 1 or less, even perhaps not Bravo, but a lot of Guardian decks, even other than Bravo, will have a series of cards with lower cost. But I think probably other than Bravo and some Oldham decks, you're probably going to want to play Plunder the Poor against most of the rest of the field because there will still be a number of cards or a decent density of cards at that lower cost level. Rob the Rich is a little bit less desirable because the density of cards with cost 2 or greater in pretty much any deck except Guardians is going to be much lower than the density of lower cost cards. But, you know, Rob the Rich is there as a good sideboard option to bring in against Guardians. 1 for 5, fine stat line. And if you do manage to hit with it, then obviously you're pretty good odds to actually hit and fulfill the contract. Nyx the Nimble, I think, is probably less good. You're contracted to banish your opponent's reaction cards. It's another 1 for 5, which in general I think is probably the less desirable between the options of 0 for 4 or 1 for 5. But it cares about reaction cards. Now, a lot of decks will play reactions against Assassin because of the importance of your on-hits to your game plan and the fact that you're going to be playing your own attack reactions and combat tricks to try and get things to hit. So Nyx the Nimble can be a bit of a cheeky include if you are pretty confident that your opponent's going to be sideboarding into heaps of defense reactions, or if Assassin becomes such a player in the metagame that a lot of decks are just packing heaps of defense reactions full stop. It's a way for Assassin to guard against that risk. But in general, I think it's probably going to be one that you'll lean on the lighter side, maybe just play the reds, for example. Fleece the Frail, similarly, it cares about opponents' cards with 2 or less block. Now, that is going to be good against ninjas, against other decks that are pretty low to the ground, not planning to block, perhaps playing more instants, more reactions, and more attack actions or non-attacks that have block 2. Even against Runeblades, a lot of their non-attack actions will be block 2. So you've got sort of a 50-50 a lot of the time against Runeblades, or close to, of hitting something that has 2 or less defense. But yeah, probably not in the best category for me. Like, this is one that at the start of the metagame, at least until I know where things are settling and what the density is looking like of block values, I'll probably be a little bit lighter on the Fleece the Frails, maybe more towards just playing the reds again. So those are the main contract cards. We've got the Majestics, which have the more powerful on hits, and then the simple single banish on hit off the top of the deck with these common and rare contracts, and all of them obviously generating you the silver token, and the Majestics generating you some additional value as well. So you'll notice that none of these base attacks have go again, or none of these attacks have base go again. Obviously, we've got our boots that can give any of our assassin attack action cards go again if they hit. But how do we get go again if we're not guaranteed to hit? And so perhaps on the first attack of our turn, when we're demanding some kind of response and wanting to not just get blown out by getting blocked out and have our turn end. So there's obviously a few generic options, both at the instant and non-attack action, in the instant and non-attack action space that will allow us to get go again or get an extra action point. Even bigger than that, synergizes really well with our weapons. Obviously, if we manage to hit with a spider's bite, then we will have dealt physical damage, so we can then play even bigger than that. Then we get to opt, reveal the top card of the deck. If it has attack greater than the amount of damage that we've dealt, which is 1, then we get to create a quicken token and draw a card. So it's a really efficient way to get go again without really having to spend a card. And with a density in our deck of threats that is very likely to hit, particularly the red version here with Opt 3. And it's an incentive, I suppose, for our opponents to be blocking our spider's bites, which is something that we probably don't mind too much. If we pitch a blue, attack with our weapon, if our opponent commits a card to that, that's probably not too bad. You know, we can go pitch something else, attack with the other weapon. If they block, then we just go attack, and then Arsenal will be even bigger than that. But I think more often than not, you're going to see your opponent not blocking the weapon, which makes even bigger than that an even better include. Because unlike Kodachi's, where the opponent might be more incentivized to block, or at least, you know, if they smell an even bigger than that, they can just block really easily with an equipment. It's obviously a little bit harder to block the spider bites because of the piercing keyword. So this one I think is going to be a staple in Arakni decks. The next one is Captain's Call. It gives you the flexibility of the go again or the pump, which is obviously the benefit of Captain's Call, but it is a little bit more costly in terms of cards on average than even bigger than that, because it doesn't replace itself. So that's worth thinking about. Lead the Charge, but it doesn't have the conditionality, obviously. Lead the Charge similarly gives you the straight go again, doesn't give you the flexibility of the +2, but it gives you the additional flexibility of an action point rather than just go again, which helps against Spectres, but obviously not such a big issue in Classic Constructed now, but who knows in the future. Flock of the Featherwalkers is, I think, a really good option in Arakni as well. You know, all of your attacks, as I said, are cost 0 or 1, other than Surgical Extraction at Majestic. So everything else, all your common and rares, and the other 2 Majestics are going to fulfill the reveal cost for Flock of the Featherwalkers. So your attack's going to be full of cards that will fulfill this reveal cost. And slotting this in at the end of a chain, at the end of a turn, is going to feel really good, I think, because you've got a deck that's full of cards that are going to make essentially maximum use out of that Quicken token. The one awkward thing about it is that if you start your turn with the Quicken token and then you attack with your Spider Bites, obviously they're going to use up the Quicken token as a weapon, so you are going to have to be a bit careful on the following turn how you sequence things. It might mean that you come in with an attack first, or you forego Spider Bites on the turns where you start with a Quicken token in play, but I think that's an okay price to pay for the additional flexibility and the, I guess, efficiency of the Quicken token and how much efficient use you're able to make of it because of the nature of your attacks, and that they are pushed in power level in terms of base power level because they don't have go again. It means that they're the perfect attacks to be using a Quicken token on. Razor Reflex is another one that you can use, obviously, to give go again on hit. It's got the same effect as your boots, but it gives obviously a pump, 1 at blue, 2 at yellow, 3 at red, and it gives you that on hit go again, which is really nice. So what kind of tricks can we use to make sure that our attacks hit, either to get our boots to give us go again, or just to get our on hit effects to make sure we fulfill our contracts? There are a couple of tricks in the set that come in the Assassin class specifically. So we've got Shred is a rare. It's a 0 cost at red. It gives -4 to target card defending an Assassin attack. So it's worth noting that this only works when you're attacking with an Assassin card, but most of the cards you're going to be using with on hit triggers in your deck are going to be Assassin cards anyway, so that's okay. And interestingly, this does give -4. Obviously, that's most important against sync belows, you know, 0 for 4 defense reactions, and against bigger defense reactions that your opponent might be playing. So very interesting. It's a super efficient card if it does manage to snag -4 off something, but it's even efficient if it's just playing on a 3 block. That's still fine. Cut to the Chase gives you the reverse, the usual, just +3 for 0 mana. And you also get to look at the top card of a defending hero's deck, and you may put it on the bottom. So it gives you just that little extra buff to your chances of hitting with your contract. And it's worth noting as well and reminding ourselves that Arakni's native hero ability, when we do play our contract attacks, gives us that peek and the option to put one to the bottom as well. So if you play a contract, use Arakni's hero ability, see something that you don't like, put it to the bottom, and then you cut to the chase, you get to do that again and give yourself a really good chance of hitting with your contract. And if you do see something with a cut to the chase, then that's a really good time to use your Mask of Perdition as well, because you know that you're going to hit the first time and give yourself a chance to hit again. Lunging Press is a +1 for 0 resources. It's a rare, but it only comes in blue pitch. So this was one from Crucible of War. I think it's going to be particularly good in Arakni because you do want a density of blues in your deck. A 0 cost is nice because your Spider Bites are pretty mana intensive and you've got a lot of 1 for 5. So just pitching 1 blue for the turn is kind of where I think you're going to want to be a lot of the time. And also the +1 can be relevant because, as we're going to see in a minute, I think there may be a place for Talisman of Featherfoot in this deck, and that particular +1 buff I think is going to be relevant for that reason. Art of War similarly gives a +1 buff, which you can do in the attack reaction step to fulfill the requirement on Talisman of Featherfoot if you want, and in general it's just a great card for these sorts of decks. You're going to have a high density of attack action cards to banish with the Art of War, and you're going to have a lot of things that care about that +1 buff. And again, similar to the efficiency of Flock of the Featherwalkers and its Quicken token in this sort of deck where your attack actions are pushed in terms of the power of their on-hit ability. They don't have Go Again, they don't have particularly high base stats. Flock of the Featherwalkers giving you a Quicken token, and Art of War giving you Go Again and the option to have Go Again, plus the ability to more likely hit because you're giving the +1 as well. Pretty much ticks all the boxes that Arakni wants. So Art of War is going to be an absolute staple in this deck, I think. So the other idea and facet to Arakni is obviously these silver tokens. So you can accumulate them from your contracts and you can use them to rebuy your equipment. But we're going to look here at a couple of other ways you can both accumulate and use silver tokens. So the first one is a Majestic. It's a blue, it blocks for 3, and it's a non-attack action, which is pretty good. Not many blue non-attack actions do block for 3. Costs 0, and it says if you've completed a contract this turn, create 4 silver tokens. It is a bit awkward in that it doesn't have Go Again, and that if you're chaining, I think a lot of the time your play pattern as Arakni is going to be chain an attack into another attack. That's going to be what you're wanting to do to have the maximum output, and obviously each of your attacks is another opportunity to generate a silver token from the contract ability. So you're foregoing that to play Payday, but you are getting 4 silver tokens, which is quite a lot. Like that's 2 equipment rebuys, which could be pretty important for setting up for future turns. You could rebuy your boots twice in successive turns and block with them, or you could rebuy both your equipment in one turn if that was important to you. So I think Payday is very powerful given the equipment rebuy option and given the importance of the boots to continuing to chain together attacks and to extend your turns, and getting yourself essentially 2 turns of boots from one Payday is probably going to be worth foregoing an attack on one of those turns a lot of the time. It just means that you can stagger your damage and stagger your turns and build to some consistency in the following turns using Payday, as long as you can hit, of course. And that I think is going to be one of the biggest challenges for Arakni, is you balancing your tricks and your ability to actually hit and you get the Go Again from the boots with having enough native Go Again to use on your first attack so that your boots are more often threatening the third attack rather than the second. Cash Out is another option to generate silver, so you can destroy weapons, equipment, and non-token items you control to generate a silver. Cash Out has not been particularly good in any other decks that don't have a way to use the silver, but it's worth reevaluating and thinking about whether potentially trashing an item or an equipment that you have in play might be worthwhile to generate silver at some points in the game. It's possibly not, but I think it's at least worth thinking about. So then how can we actually use silver that we do generate? One way that we can use it is Knack Brickabrack, which costs 3, and it doesn't have Go Again, but it does let us do some pretty awesome setup. You know, if you trash 4 silver with Knack Brickabrack, you get to go and get 2 amulet, potion, or talismans and put them in the arena. So when you're trashing 4 silver, you're getting 2 items for 1 action and for 3 resources. Once you get up to 6 or 8 silver, which is not beyond the realms of possibility for Arakni to accumulate, then you're starting to get to the point where you're getting 3 or 4 potions or amulets or talismans out of your deck. You can start to generate a pretty significant advantage then. So if we think about some options for what you can grab with this, you've got Amulet of Ignition, which gives you a 1 resource discount on your first weapon activation for the turn. So that's okay, nothing to blow you away. Talisman of Recompense turns a red into a blue. That's pretty good. At some point in the game, you get to fix your mana. That's helpful. Talisman of Featherfoot. I think this is going to be good in Arakni. As I said, it's got Go Again. If you do happen to draw it, it costs 0. You can just put it down on the board earlier on in the game. And given how important Go Again is to Arakni and the dearth of Go Again options that Arakni has, plus the fact that I think Lunging Press and Art of War are going to be good anyway in the deck, means that having Talisman of Featherfoots might make a bit of sense. And being able to tutor them up with the Knack Brickabrack is also fine. But then, of course, we've got Energy Potion giving us extra resources on a turn when we want to be particularly explosive, and Time Snap Potion giving us, of course, the classic option to have additional action points. So you can start to see where if you build up silvers throughout the game, then you Knack Brickabrack, turn them into potions, talismans, whatever's useful, your resources, action points, or Go Again, basically, on a future turn. Then we can be saving towards a particularly big coup de grace future turn. So this playstyle is not going to be every Arakni deck, but it at least gives us an option for a different type of Arakni deck that plays a little bit of denial, a little bit of value generation early on in the game, asking your opponent, do you want to let me generate heaps of silver or not? Do you want to block? And then if your opponent does let you generate some silver over the course of the game, then you can start turning that into a big board state that you can then subsequently try and turn into heaps of damage on a big combo turn later. So something to think about. Not necessarily going to be amazing, but I think worth testing. And then, of course, Cash In is part of that as well. It lets us turn 2 silvers into 2 cards, or plus 1 card effectively, because the Cash In does, of course, cost you a card itself. But plus 1 card, as we know in Flesh and Blood, is massive. Breaking that card symmetry and going to 5 or 6 cards if you've got an arsenal against your opponent's 4 or 5 if they have an arsenal allows you to pretty much guarantee one on hit that turn most of the time, which in a deck like Arakni is pretty good. So other attacks that you might want to play in the deck, we've got, of course, the classic Snatch. Any kind of aggressive deck, 0 for 4, relevant on hit. Always happy to have Snatch in there. And in a deck that doesn't have a lot of other native Go Agains, and therefore is going to be playing a lot of support cards that give Go Again, Snatch fits in quite nicely there. Enlightened Strike, similarly, it's just that classic flexibility. It can have Go Again itself. It can be a good middle piece in your turns. You go Spider Bite, Enlightened Strike, and then a 0 for 4 is a perfectly serviceable turn. And it can also obviously have the flexibility. If you do have a Quicken token or something else, some other way of giving Go Again, then you can use this to cycle a card in your hand. And then Regicide is the aforementioned Arakni card that doesn't have Contract. Oh, it's got Contract of sorts. The Contract, though, is if it hits a Royal Hero, they lose the game. I don't know how much play this one's going to see. It's a 0 for 3 at blue, which is fine. Actually, probably slightly above rate. But it does have this big downside of when the combat chain closes, you lose the game. It also has this interesting ability that says Regicide can't be defended by cards with the same name as cards in the defending hero's banish zone, which means that even in a regular game that's not against a royal hero, if you get down to low life totals and your opponent has used all of their equipment, this can potentially be unblockable. If you've had a bit of a slugfest and you've managed to hit with quite a few of your contract cards and banish a decent chunk of your opponent's deck, then Regicide can have pseudo unblockable, or at least be very difficult for your opponent to block. And with pitch stacking and second cycles and card tracking, you can actually know what cards your opponent has in hand, and therefore what cards they are unable to block with. And if you know that they've got 4 cards in hand that they're unable to block with and no ability to cycle, then Regicide can threaten to kill them, regardless of whether they're royal or not. So definitely worth considering. It's a blue, it's a 0 for 3 with 3 defense, so it's also just fine to block with. And yeah, I think it's probably worth having that 1 copy in there. You can only have 1, of course, because it's legendary, but I think it's going to be an interesting one and worth keeping an eye on for those sneaky kills out of nowhere. So the last thing to briefly have a chat about is the equipment. We've obviously talked about the Mask of Perdition, but you've also got Crown of Providence as an option. If you just want to have the boots as your rebuy option and you want to have the cycling of Crown of Providence, that may end up being where you go. But I have a sneaking suspicion that the ability to have battle-worn blocks on your Mask of Perdition and then rebuy it is probably going to be more powerful than the Crown of Providence's 2-block. We've then got Tunic in the chest slot. I think it's probably going to be the go-to of choice. For a class that doesn't have any chest equipment of its own, the best generic is probably the place to go. In terms of the arm slot, you've got very limited options because we don't have an assassin arms. We've got Crackerjacks, which gives something +1, which could be relevant. That's not irrelevant in the deck. And then, of course, we've got Goliath Gauntlet, which can give our Surgical Extraction as the only native in-faction 2-cost attack +2, which is not bad because Surgical Extraction has a great on-hit. Or, of course, we've got Snapdragon Scalers in the feet, and then Black Tech Whisperers, the boots we've mentioned. So that brings us to the end of the Hero Spotlight. I hope you enjoyed. We'll be back with some more videos up about the Dynasty set in the near future, and hope that you are all enjoying the set, and good luck cracking your packs. Let us know how you go. Let us know what you think in the comments. Are you excited to brew Arakni? Have you got some different takes and some things that you think I might have missed from the card pool? Interested to hear your thoughts. Do stay in touch, and we'll talk to you soon. Cheers.